Right, so row 2, I've turned my work, so I'm now looking at the reverse of the work, which means I need to start, my row 2 is over in here, so I need to make sure I'm reading my chart from left to right. And this immediately, you will see that this little stitch marker has helped me out here, because I can see I've got 2 stitches before I start my repeat. So if I look at my work here, I can see I've got 2 stitches and then it's marked as beginning of the repeat. So there's absolutely no way I could confuse myself and start knitting 3 stitches as if I was working on the wrong side, working from the wrong side over here kind of thing. So you will see that there's no yarn overs or anything too fancy on this side at all. And we've still got these dots, so let's just work through it together and you'll see how that starts to progress the pattern. Now, our first stitch is blank, which means because we're on a wrong side, it means it's the normal stitch that we would work, which would be a purl stitch. And where we've got our little black dots, because we're on the wrong side, those are going to be knit stitches. So you can see what's happening. I think we're creating a little moss stitch here, just slipping my stitch marker. And that is all I'm going to do. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 purl, knit, purl. 1, 2, and you'll be able to see 3 because you're building on what's gone before. 4. So if you're on top of a knit stitch, you're purling. If you're on top of a purl stitch, you're knitting. 5. Right, so I've just done my purl stitch. I've got 3 knit stitch in a row here, and that is me dealing with my yarn over, can you see, from my previous row. So I'm going to knit into that. I'm going to knit into my central double decrease, and I'm going to knit into my other yarn over. And if you looked there, you can knit into the front if you like, or you can knit into the back. I'll just knit into the back there. I don't know whether that creates a larger yarn over. Let's see what happens there. Right, so I've done those 3 knit stitches in a row, and I'm now back to purl, knit, purl, knit. Purl, knit, purl, knit. And hurrah, I've reached my stitch marker, which means I've reached the end of a repeat. So I'm just going to slip that, go back over here to the beginning of the repeat and do it all again. Okay, and I'm coming up to my last repeat now, purl, knit, ending on a knit over here, slipping my last little stitch marker, and that leaves me with 3 stitches, purl, knit, purl at the end. And again, super easy to see if you're reading it right or if you're doing it right, because you are just building on what's gone before. Where there was a knit, there's a purl, and vice versa. So that was row 2, and I'm going to turn to the right side now, and what you can see already is you can see the yarn overs. Okay, you can see how that relates. I hold it there. How that relates to that pattern, yarn over and then a central spine going up and then a yarn over. So rows 3 and 4, in fact rows 3, 4 and 5, all the way up in fact to row 7, all the way up to row 9 are just building on the stitches that we already know about. So I'm going to go ahead and work all the way up to the beginning of row 9, and then we'll just have a little look at the other 2 kinds of decreases, and you are golden. Okay, so I am now on row 9, which is a right side row, and you can see with my little stitch marker there, I'm 2 stitches in to my repeat, my first repeat. So that will be a knit and a purl. And I wanted to just go on to row 9 so we could have a look at the decreasing stitches. So the knit 2 together, which is your right leaning decrease here, and the slip 1, knit 1, pass, slip stitch over, which is your left leaning decrease here, because then that will be all the stitches that you will need to be able to complete this section of the project. Right, so I'm 2 stitches in, I've knit, purl, I'm now going to knit again, and then I'm going to go straight into that right leaning decrease, which is knit 2 together. Okay, so it's literally, if you're not familiar, it's just literally, as the name suggests, I'm going to put my needle, rather than going into the next stitch, I'm going to go into 2 stitches. So the next one along as well, put the needle into 2 stitches together and knit them together. Okay, so I've knit 2 together and I've now got to work a yarn over, and this is our final sort of yarn over, the third sort that we've not done yet, and we're going from a knit to a knit, so we haven't got to do anything too too special, because my yarn is at the back ready to knit, and that's where I kind of need it to be able to knit my next stitch. However, if I just bring it forward between those needles, and then I go ahead and knit my next stitch, so I'm going to be knitting this stitch here. If I go ahead, so I've brought the yarn forward between the needles. If I go ahead and knit the stitch, what I'm doing when I bring my yarn round to knit the stitch is I am creating the yarn over, and you can see it there, just created it. So that's the third kind of yarn over, and you can see, you see it sitting right there. Works perfectly, beautiful. So I've finished this stitch. I've now got another yarn over, and again I'm going knit to knit. So again I'm just going to bring it yarn from the back to the front and work my next stitch, which is this slip 1, knit 1, pass slip stitch over. So I've put my yarn through to the front to create the yarn over. I'm going to slip the next stitch as if to knit. I'm going to knit the stitch after that, and then I'm going to pick up that stitch that I knit and pass it over, pick up the stitch that I've slipped, my apologies, and pass it over the stitch that I've knit. So what I've done there, if you can see, you can just about see, I've got a right leaning decrease there. So that little stitch is slanted just to the right, and then I've got my yarn over, knit, yarn over, and then this little stitch here is slanting off to the left. So that's going to give us some nice definition on our pattern as we work it. So those are the last 2 kinds of stitches that you need to know about for this lace work. So I think you are, like I said, golden. So good to go. So I'm going to work a full repeat of this, so we can have a little look and see what it's like before we move on to some shaping.